Welcome to Under the Microscope, your go-to podcast for materials and nanoscience. I'm your host, Dr. Pranoti Kshirsagar, and I have a PhD in materials and nanoscience. Together on this podcast, we explore the fascinating world of nanoscience, where the smallest discoveries make the biggest impact. With each episode, I introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials and nanoscience. And then we take a deep dive in a conversation format where we talk about their groundbreaking research, their career journey, their innovative discoveries, and their inspiring stories. And also there is a lot of fun stuff as well. This is a fun and light sort of a conversation that we have while we explore the fascinating world of nanoscience together. As part of our commitment to fostering scientific engagement, every guest on Under the Microscope podcast also gets access to our Blue Sky account for one entire week. This is a rotation curation account on Blue Sky with the same name as the podcast, Under the Microscope. This is where the scientists communicate directly with you, my lovely audience. So make sure you are following along on Blue Sky as well. And if you're not yet, the link is in the description and the show notes. All right. In today's episode, which is episode number 223, I have a very special guest for you, who is also the next QuanTour Hero. If you haven't heard about the Quantor project yet, let me tell you a bit about it. So Quantor is an outreach project funded by the German Physics Society. And it's an incredible project where a quantum light source is traveling across Europe, where it stops at 12 different labs in 12 different countries over a course of 12 months. Today's guest is the stop number 6 out of the 12, and he will also be hosting the light source in his lab. Now, the Science Talk is the official science communication partner of this brilliantly amazing project, Quantor, which is, as I mentioned, an outreach project funded by the German Physics Society. To know more about Quantor and also follow along the journey of this quantum light source traveling across Europe, make sure you follow the Instagram account, quantour.eu. The link for that is also in the show notes and the description, and also the Quantor websites where you can explore the other Quantor heroes and the next Quantor heroes as well, and learn more about this particular project. All right, on to today's episode. So, episode number 223. That's quite a number, I know. In today's episode, we travel to Cambridge in England to visit Mete Atature, who is a professor at the University of Cambridge. In today's episode, we will spotlight Mete's engaging research on the interaction of light and matter at the quantum level. We also cover quantum sensing, networks, and secure communications. Mete explains the complexities of working with various materials, such as semiconductor quantum dots, diamonds, hexagonal boron nitride, while emphasizing their properties and applications in quantum technologies. Mete also delves into the practical aspects and the future implications of quantum science, including potential applications in life sciences. This one was particularly surprising for me. He also shares his insights into his career journey because, of course, we will also go into his career journey. We ask him about his favorite research project and what keeps him in the science and what could make his research experience better. So there is a lot to unpack in this conversation. So I strongly suggest that you grab a coffee or a drink, or tea, water, whatsoever, and sit back. Trust me, you're going to want to hear all the incredible things Mete has to share. And while you're at it, make sure that you are hitting that follow button if you're listening to the Under the Microscope podcast on your favorite podcast app. And if you're watching on YouTube, yes, the video of this podcast goes on the YouTube channel of the Science Talk. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button as well, because this helps bring materials and nanoscience to more and more people who are interested in materials and nanoscience. And there are multiple different ways of showing your support for the podcast, and subscribing and following or even leaving a review is the most easiest and the most convenient thing for you to do. If you want to learn more about how you can join the conversation, I'm also going to put the link to the newsletter of the science talk, which you can also sign up for if you're interested. The links, all of these links that I'm mentioning, are in the show notes and the episode description. All right, without further delay, let's get into today's episode. But first, a very quick word from our sponsor today, Twitter Insights Pro.
If you've ever wanted to secure your Twitter archive, align your tweets with your evolving brand, or even repurpose your best content for other platforms like LinkedIn or Instagram, this is for you. With Twitter Insights Pro, you'll get a detailed, organized overview of every tweet you've ever posted, complete with visual documentation. It's an easy way to preserve your online presence and expand your influence. Check out the link in the episode description to learn more and take the first step today.
Hi, Mete. Welcome to Under the Microscope. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I want to know everything about the synchronized dance and what do you mean by synchronized spins? How does that work? So let's start with your research now at the University of Cambridge. What exactly are you doing? Please explain your research in super simple words.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I'm looking forward to our conversation. It's an exciting topic for me, and I hope you'll find it exciting as well. The research that we do in our team is focusing on how light and matter interact, but at quantum mechanics level. So single photon, single electron, single nuclear spin, but inside a material, as opposed to the more conventional single atom isolated in vacuum in space. We work with devices, actually semiconductors, diamond, atomically thin two-dimensional materials stacked on top of each other, like graphene, for example. And we look at how these individual constituents of light and matter interact with each other. And through that interaction, which, as I said, is through quantum mechanical properties and attributes, can we actually leverage that for various technologies? The two technologies we aim to develop devices for or technology for are quantum networks and quantum sensors. So can we get nanoscale information, a window into the way materials behave under certain conditions? That's quantum sensing. And can we actually leverage this photon and spin, photon and electron interactions to be able to do either distributed computing or communications between different locations? So those are the directions we're heading.
Okay, this is quite a lot. So sensing and networking?
Networks.
Networks, yeah.
Quantum
Sensing and networks,
yeah.
Okay. And then the last word that you said is also communication, because that is something that I'm trying to learn with the Quantor project. So the Quantor light source is going to also be with you as well. The previous Quantor heroes have already explained to some extent. So the quantum communication, quantum entanglement as well is something that we covered. The different materials and the different types of quantum dots also we covered with the stressed quantum dot, relaxed quantum dots, so on and so forth. So I'm just trying to fit in, like, where does your research come in what I have or our listeners have already learned about quantum mechanics or quantum science through the Quantor project, in the scope of the Quantor project. So can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So until now, you've heard the photonic side of the story. The quantum dot, a small nano device in the end, generates single photons. They're very high quality, a very bright source of single photons. And these photons have to, because they're flying at the speed of light, they're the fastest way to communicate. We send them somewhere else. And then if we encode information to these photons individually, the receiver can look at the information encoded, polarization, time delay between different photons, frequency. There are various ways we can encode information. If they can read this information from the individual photons, then we establish a communication channel. What is nice about photons is that if you rely on single photons, then only one measurement can be done before photon disappears. So there is no eavesdropper in principle to tap into the line quietly and listen to the conversation. So there's a nice secure communication, knowing that you're not being listened by others. So that's the spirit of quantum cryptography and why people are anxious to have reliable, good sources of photons, single photons, where information can be encoded. That has been going on. And you've covered that in the previous podcasts. What we bring into the picture is the interface to spin. So the photon isn't just generated out of the blue and travels. We can actually generate the photon in such a way that the attributes of the photon and the information that is encoded on the photon isn't isolated, but rather entangled with a leftover electron spin also residing within the quantum dot. So quantum dot doesn't have to only generate photons. It can hold a stationary qubit, what we call a stationary qubit, an electron whose spin orientation up or down is a mechanism to hold information as well. So instead of simply writing a new code, 0 or 1, or a combination thereof, onto a photon and simply send it, what we can do actually, thanks to quantum mechanics, is that we can create 2 bits of information with the 0 and 1 combination for the photon and the 0 and 1 combination for the electron, but in a way that they're correlated. So when I take the photon out, send it at the speed of light to the receiver end, their link remains. The quantum entanglement is distributed. Instead of 2 photons being quantum entangled, I can create quantum entanglement between 2 distinct objects, an electron and a photon. And that creates the concept of quantum information being distributed between different nodes of a quantum network, for example, while holding on to the information almost like a memory at each node. So this way we can distribute information and distribute entanglement across a wide network, holding on to quantumness at each node, rather than simply a source of light.
Okay. So many questions. Okay.
Whole new dimension opened.
Okay. Oh my God. Exactly. So I have so many questions. Okay. So there is the electron and then there is the photon. Photon is the one that is communicating, the secure communication that we covered. The photon is the secure communication aspect, and the electron, in this case, is it safe to say, to oversimplify it, because you also mentioned your work is with light and matter, right? So is it safe to say that photon is the light and the electron is the matter that is saving, let's say, the information?
That's right.
So if you, Mete, sitting in Cambridge, wants to communicate with Pranoti sitting in Germany, so you are able to send me a signal from your node to my node, to oversimplify it. And so the information that is generated is saved locally by the electron on your side in Cambridge, and then the photon is the one that is carrying this information and sending me from Cambridge to Germany. Is that so? This is the communication aspect, right? Okay,
that's right. So think of it this way: if I simply encode information on the photon myself, and then send it to you, and you make a measurement on the photon, you gain the information right away. You learn if it's 0 or a 1. And if you do this enough, you can then get a superposition as well through statistics. All that's fine. But let's say that I don't want, our goal isn't simply that you find out whether I sent you a 0 or 1. The goal is to create an entanglement between our 2 nodes. Then what I want to do is create a photon that could be 1 or 0, say through polarization, but leave behind, if possible, leave behind an electron that can also be 1 and 0, spin up, spin down, in such a way that if the photon is up, the electron is down. If the photon is down, the electron is up. So they're correlated. And any combination thereof. So they remain quantum correlated. And then I send you the photon. And here's the trick. You don't actually measure the photon to find out what its properties are. You get the photon and interact it with your electron on your node, who's waiting, ready to take on, is initialized and is ready to take on a state transfer. So a quantum state or quantum information gets transferred from the photon I sent you to your electron. Then what we end up achieving is that your electron, your stationary qubit, is anticorrelated now with my electron. So they're quantum correlated, they're entangled, and the photon disappeared. Photon got absorbed by transferring that information. So I use the photon not as a mediator of information to tell you what it is, but a mediator of information to entangle 2 spins. So now I have a entanglement distributed between UK and Germany. And then I can operate, now that I have these 2 entities that are entangled, I can leverage properties of entanglement to do processing or share further information.
Oh my God. Okay. This is so cool. So you generate the information in Cambridge, the electron is saving that information and then using the photon to send me to Germany, from Cambridge to Germany, to send this information. whatsoever, then the photon that you send is transferring this information to my local electron. And once that is done, the photon is destroyed, which is why the quantum communication is secure, because there is nothing to encrypt anymore, because the photon is destroyed. Right. It's done. It's gone.
Exactly. So now comes the interesting bit. We said from UK to Germany, that's a long way. So technically, photon loss means that actually in reality, if we try this, it would disappear. That's why classical communication requires amplifiers. So signal attenuates as propagating in fiber optics. And then you have a little amplifier, classical amplifier, signal boosts up, and then it goes back down again, boosts up, goes back down again. So your signal, actually, classical signal gets amplified numerous times before it reaches you, right? Across the oceans and all of that. Now, for quantum communication, we're talking about single photons. I cannot amplify single photons. That's the no cloning theorem. And that's the whole reason why we have the absolute security of quantum cryptography. So how do I send the photon to you and actually get it to reach you when there's so much loss on the way? This is where this electron comes in now. What I do is I throw in these quantum dots in between where it can give me the option for the photon to transfer its properties to, before getting lost into the environment, transfers it to the electron. The electron generates a new photon, sends that photon down. So we break this long distance into many smaller distances. And instead of an amplifier, we simply increase our probability that there is a photon after that much distance by actually generating the photons. Now, here's the catch. I want your electron to get the information, or even you to get the information. I don't want anyone on the way to get that information from that photon. So if anything else measures, that's not secure communication, or it's not quantum communication. So I need to make sure I have a mechanism that transfers quantum information to the electron and then re-emit a photon from that quantum dot with the correct information encoded again, with no one else knowing this. And that's exactly the way the quantum dot operates, with the electron and the photon interacting without any of us making a measurement on the quantum state. That's why the replacement for the classical conventional amplifiers, signal amplifiers in a fiber, is in fact these what we call quantum repeaters or quantum memories along the way. So the information doesn't simply get lost in the fiber. Your probability of your signal getting lost increases as you go down the fiber. And at some point when it's critical, we say, okay, that's too much risk we've taken. It's probable that our photon has already been absorbed. So let's stop before that and let's do this conversion, and we generate the next photon and faithfully map that quantum information from one photon to the other photon to carry on. It's almost like a relay race.
The relay race, yeah.
Exactly. And it's a relay race where you guarantee that the next one you pass on to runs at the same speed of light, but has more chance that actually will survive longer, not having traveled all the way. And that prolongs the distance we can go, essentially.
So it's not the amplifier, it's more repetitors when we are sending information over hundreds or thousands of kilometers, depending on all of that.
So we don't have an amplifier because of quantum no cloning theorem. We still don't have an amplifier. We cannot have that. But this is the best thing you can have to replace that as an amplifier of probability your photon still exists in a lossy environment, like a fiber. That's the concept.
Let's say the distance between Cambridge and Germany is 1,000 kilometers, right? Now, a photon that you are generating, it has a lifetime, let's say, of 100 kilometers. 100 kilometers, then it is gone. It disappears, right? So now that means that we need to put 10 or 11 repetitors so that the information that you're sending from Cambridge to Germany is actually making it to Germany. Now that means that there are 10 stops on the way where the information is at the risk of hacked or breached. So how do we stop that? Anyone can just go. We put on a repetitor, like amplifiers, for example, and go and take this repetitor home and just connect their own device. So how do we make sure that it is secure?
Very good. So someone could actually eavesdrop by simply selecting or rerouting some of the photons on the way and making a measurement on those. So what we do is between repeater nodes, you can randomly, semi-periodically check if the distribution of entanglement is faithful. If the fidelity of entanglement correlation is still at the level you expect it to be. If there's no other interruptions, you expect a certain level of rate at which you distribute entanglement. So it's entanglement-based cryptography. You can check that your nodes are entangled with each other. And if this is dropping down, that's probably because there is a error source coming in, some source of decoherence coming in, tapping into your line. And that's where you catch potential eavesdroppers or anyone tampering with the system. And then you notice this and you stop communication. You know that something is up and you go and check. But otherwise, it's checking between nodes that your bit rate for secure communication and the quality of your quantum entanglement remains above a certain threshold where you know is your normal operation scheme. So it's a self-checking mechanism as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it doesn't just do the repetition or doing the relay, like transferring the photon from one to other, so the information rather through the photon, but it is also making sure that, okay, I'm clean or I'm safe, I'm secure, no one has breached me. And if there is, then you will get like a, hey, Mete, number 5, something is off or something. Okay. This is interesting. This is like I feel like with every episode or with every QuanTour Hero, I understand the quantum, like secure quantum communication even better. So thank you for that.
Quick break from the conversation. Just a reminder about Twitter Insights Pro. If you're looking to protect your Twitter history and make sure your brand stays consistent across platforms, this is the solution. With our service, you can easily download, organize, and repurpose your Twitter archive, turning your old tweets into new content for LinkedIn, Instagram, or even newsletters. Want to know more? The link is in the episode description. Don't miss out.
Next question about the research. I told you I have so many questions. You also mentioned that you are also working with different materials, right? With graphene or with diamond or like these stacked materials and stuff. So why do you need these materials? Because we have this single photon emitter, which is the quantum light source, which you will also get, which is basically a ring that accelerates somehow all of that. Because I'm a material scientist. What are these materials doing? What is the role of these materials? Please, can you explain that?
Absolutely. I think what is interesting with quantum technologies or quantum science and relevant technologies is that it actually unites disciplines, unites people. So if you go back 20, 30 years, probably 30 years ago, someone working with semiconductors would not go to a seminar on cold atoms or trapped ions. As someone in the atomic physics community, AMO community, would not necessarily sit in a layered material defect concentration talk, right? Dislocation is not something they would care about in a material. However, this has changed. I think one of the benefits of quantum science with the goal of developing a technology is that we all got together, right? I go to trapped ion talks and my trapped ion colleagues go to superconducting qubit talks. Superconducting qubit talks are listened to by people working on zinc oxide defects, for example. That's because there is relevant information and relevant protocols that we could borrow from each other. So what our group does is that we're physicists by training. So while we're developing from, say, quantum repeater from one aspect, say a material platform like semiconductor quantum dots, we are looking at other materials to explore what else can be done. Semiconductor quantum dots are great for photon generation, whereas the nitrogen vacancy center in diamond, or now tin vacancy center in diamond, is great from the spin perspective, the memory. The memory is much longer time scale than the other physical systems. Another material is very interesting, hexagonal boron nitride, an old material which is now coming back with quantum properties. Individual defects are actually optically active, very similar to quantum dots, but they can be very close to a surface, literally down to a nanometer or two, and be able to operate as a sensor, which quantum dots we don't necessarily think of. So all these possibilities in the big portfolio of quantum technologies requires dedicated material systems that leverage their expertise and advantages so that we can channel them in the right direction. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, first, as a physicist, understand what phenomena and what level of quantum control we can impose to achieve that phenomena in these materials, and then see which kind of translation we can aim for with these systems. If if at all possible.
Okay. This is really good. This is very... Okay, wow, okay. Can you give me an example? Because I think with Armando and Ronaldo, we talked a lot about the quantum dots itself, like the tiny little nanodots, which are the quantum dots. And with Carlos, our previous guest, who is in Spain, there we talked, or rather we touched upon this aspect of, for example, hexagonal boron nitride. And there is this effect, which is then creating a photon, I think.
Exactly in the same way. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So can you give me, let's say, an example of another material? Because I remember Carlos also mentioned that hexagonal boron nitride, you can use it at room temperature to generate photons, I think, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that's why his episode was called Hot Single Photons, because he's able to generate hot room temperature single photons from hexagonal boron nitride. And he also mentioned that hexagonal boron nitride is the best option in terms of material out there as of now for the generation of the single photons at room temperature. What is your comment on that? I'm going to go now. But am I going in the right direction? I'm trying to put the other materials that you mentioned in this context then, or maybe the other materials that you mentioned that you work with have other advantages, which does not have to be like hexagonal boron nitride.
Exactly. I think that's precisely the point. We would like, once we identify a property of a material platform and say that could be useful for one aspect, there is no magic material that solves all quantum technology problems, and there is no single device that answers all possible technology problems, which makes it exciting because we get to do research. But I think, so one of the things that hexagonal boron nitride brings, in contrast to semiconductor quantum dots, is the room temperature operation. In fact, I'll go a step beyond. I would say it's temperature agnostic. I can cool it down or heat it up. It will still work. So that means the same device is operational at very cold temperatures and very hot temperatures, which is what you want for space applications. So if I need to put secure communications on a satellite on space, I don't want to use a large bulky cryostat to cool the devices all the way to 4 Kelvin. I also don't want a device that is very temperature dependent. I want a device that doesn't actually care about temperature, but just simply operates. And that's what you get in space. As you go around the orbit, you will see the sunlight or you won't see the sunlight, and the temperature varies dramatically. So you need to make sure that you have devices that can sustain this variation. So it's the temperature agnostic nature of hexagonal boron nitride that I find particularly interesting. And in the same spirit, while it emits photons, reliable photons at room temperature or a range of temperatures, its spin is also reliable at arbitrary temperatures. That's why you can talk about building a quantum memory with hexagonal boron nitride without having to worry about temperature stabilization or anything like that. You can say then, if you have hexagonal boron nitride, why are you working with semiconductor quantum dots? The answer is simple. In terms of material quality, hexagonal boron nitride and these particular defects have not benefited from years of improvement and optimization that semiconductor quantum dots have benefited. And if you simply ask the question, what is the best single photon source today, including atoms, it'll be semiconductor quantum dots. That's clear, right? So which spin is the best? It's not semiconductor quantum dots, it's diamond. Hexagonal boron nitride sits in between, and we're trying to address all of those. So that's why everyone brings their own advantages and challenges for us to solve. So it's a little puzzle for every single one of them to work with. But there might be applications where one is very preferred and the other one is for something else. And that's what we're trying to identify. Part of the game is identifying which material platform can lead to a device that answers one aspect without necessarily being all across the board solution for all possible applications.
That makes sense. Carlos mentioned that with hexagonal boron nitrides, he needs to introduce defects, and then he doesn't know exactly where the defects are. He knows somehow the site where the defect was introduced, but then what I'm curious to know is that one aspect of your research is also sensing, right? That is also something that you mentioned, that the sensing aspect. Is that where the 2D materials like graphene or so that are coming in? I would just like to understand how other materials than, of course, the hexagonal boron nitride and the semiconductor quantum dots? What role do they play? And how does that work to generate single photons? Because the goal is always to generate single photons or emit single photons, right?
That's right. For quantum sensing applications, again, this photon spin interface is the critical part. So it's the spin that does the sensing, ultimately. Just like NMR or MRI. When you go into an MRI machine, it's these proton spins that go around under an applied magnetic field. And from their signal, we can actually create an image. We can interpret what that signal is and create an image. But this is too small a signal with a tiny little spin, many of these, but tiny little spins processing. So you need to integrate many of them to get any signal. So that means the characteristic minimum volume, then therefore your spatial resolution is limited by the signal you can acquire per ensemble. The ultimate limit is one spin out of all of those, only a single one. So a single one, you have to extract that information, but it's vanishingly small. The advantage with these spin photon interfaces, like quantum dots or these defects in various materials, is that your optical link is a good way of readout. So instead of this inductive coupling that the MRI machine is required to have, we can directly read the single electron spin because it's very strongly interacting with the photon. So it embarks its information onto the photon, and I know how to detect the single photon, and I can get the information right away. So in a way, the photon again becomes a mediator between the sensor and the observer, and it faithfully transfers the information to me without having to require many of them just to build up some signal. One is all I need. I can operate literally at the ultimate limit of a single spin, providing MR measurements, magnetic resonance, as long as I can control that spin and I can map its property, whatever it has sensed in its local environment. If I can map it to the photon, I can then read the photon externally, and I'm good. And that's one of the best systems, physical systems, to realize this, turns out, is diamond. What we do is we take, just like an atomic force microscope, we take a tiny little needle and we move it around the surface. That's one way to realize this. And if this needle is made of diamond, we can actually implant, just like Carlos was saying, we can implant the atoms that we want and create a quantum defect right at the tip. And then by scanning around, that spin that is residing within that defect continues to sense at each location what that local magnetic field looks like, or temperature, depending on what your sensing modality is. And then it reports back a 2D image as you raster scan a surface. And the whole time you're reading out by photons. So it measures and sends it and you read. Measures, sends it, and you read it by photons. And you build up this image of magnetic field distribution without having to rely on many of these spins. And therefore, the footprint ideally is down to effectively a single atom. In reality, in principle, it's down to physically the size of your tip, which can be on 4 to 20, 30 nanometers. So you get incredible resolution and sensitivity with almost no feedback, back action to the material you're measuring, and you get this information. Now, this is one modality that's with an AFM tip, effectively, but made of diamond and a quantum sensor at the tip of it. Now, imagine not making this as a two-dimensional material, but going into something very complex, three-dimensional, but we want to embed our sensor inside. When you do an MR of your head, for example, obviously it's not a two-dimensional surface. You need to go in and get that information from inside. What would that correspond to for our quantum sensors? We still work with nitrogen vacancy sensors in diamond, but instead of a bulk diamond material, we work with nanodiamonds. These are 20, 30, 50 nanometer size, small, effectively cubes or balls of diamond, tetrahedrons. And these guys, we can actually put them inside materials to see how they respond. We still access them optically. So as long as the material is reasonably transparent, we can actually address these individual spins, and then we can get information from the local environment. What would be an interesting material to work with if I have the option to embed a nanodiamond inside a material? It turns out it's life sciences. So we embed these nanocrystals inside living cells of various kinds, including larger species like C. elegans worms, for example. And we get to understand how the life cycle of these cells evolve and what happens on the nanoscale, which is a very hard measurement. What happens in the nanoscale with reliable, robust, non-bleaching, good quantum sensors that tell us about the local environment from various things that it could report. It could report magnetic fields, so I can map that to ion channels and ion fluctuations. I can measure pH, I can measure temperature, I can even measure viscosity by simply the motion of the nanoparticle as it tumbles around in the busy cell environment. So it gives us all these channels of information, all extracted out by how the nanodiamond and its spin reacts, and the information is mapped onto the single photons that we detect outside.
Oh my God.
You see, a whole new world opens with if you include the spin. So the single photon side is amazing, but until now you've been focusing mostly on the single photon side of quantum dots or other materials. If you bring spin, whole new dimension opens.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This would be, and all it takes is like just putting this tiny nanodiamond or so inside, like embed that into the cell, introduce that into the cell. Because with life sciences, it's very difficult. You have to destroy the cell. The cell is dead. And after that, you do the imaging or whatsoever, like 3D mapping and all of that. Would be, that would be so cool.
And because this diamond, if you're careful about its surface, which is if you clean the surface properly and it's nice, good, pristine diamond, then it is inert. It doesn't interact with the cell. So the cell actually doesn't treat it as toxic.
The foreign material, yeah.
That's right. So cells eat it. We realize that the uptake is quite good, and they don't actually coat it with cell membrane because they worry about their toxicity. So the nanodiamond just simply flows around, and the cell doesn't mind, which is great.
You have done this already.
That's right. Yeah, which is fantastic, right? It gives you a lot of options to actually develop this into.
Oh my God.
Some sort of a diagnostic, but also understanding disease. Of course, it's very difficult to extend it to clinical level, but I think in terms of the research level of understanding, what is the onset of cancer? How does the cell's physical properties change when you expose it to certain conditions? What happens to, say, and this is one of the topics we're looking into, what happens to the embryo development in a C. elegans worm if there is temperature variations during its growth? I'm being able to really record the local temperature as a time trace and see how that leads to production, embryo production and development. All of these research opportunities are now available because we have this capability. In addition to many others, of course.
Yeah, of course. And I could also imagine injecting healthy human beings also for the fitness tracking to track, what is the blood sugar level or what is the more information you can get from inside of your body, this becomes like this preventive medicine, right? That, you're too stressed because your blood sugar is high or your blood pressure is high or whatever the hell, your iron in your blood or whatever it is. Oh
exactly.
my God.
Even understanding like how does oxidative stress lead to a change in behavior in cells, or very fundamental questions like what is temperature when you're talking about a very dynamic, out of equilibrium environment like a cell. I don't even know how to define a temperature because temperature is defined for stable and averaged equilibrium settings. And it's a strongly non-equilibrium setting. I don't even know how to really properly define temperature down to the nanoscale. So that's interesting to ask questions like that. What does a cell do when you expose it to a temperature gradient? So within a cell, if there's a temperature gradient, does the cell try to compensate it, or does the cell simply suffer from the temperature gradient because it doesn't have its own sensors? If it compensates, where is its sensor to know something is different? So all these are very interesting questions from both physics of living systems all the way to possible applications. And all of that is, bringing this back to Quantor. All of this goes back to the fact that we have been working with systems that offer not only single photon generation, but also single photon generation linked to the properties of the leftover electron or leftover spin. That combination, the fact that a photon and an electron can indeed cooperate so that the photon carries out information linked and therefore about the spin that's left behind. I'm essentially continuously making a measurement of the spin, so I learn what the spin sees in its local environment. That's the sensing part. Or I store information on the spin as the photon goes to the next node, and that's the communication part. That's the quantum networks. So mutual roles.
Oh my God. Me too. I feel like I can talk to you for hours and hours about this because I still have so many questions, but we do need to move on. But this is so cool. This is so cool.
Hey, just a quick reminder. If you're sitting on years of valuable tweets, why not put them to work? With Twitter Insights Pro, you can secure your entire Twitter archive, align your tweets with your current brand, and repurpose that content for platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram. It's a simple way to expand your reach without starting from scratch. Head to the episode description for more details and get started today.
Tell me a bit about your career journey now. Like, how did you end up being this superstar scientist, a professor at the University of Cambridge with... I am still wrapping my head around the amazing research, fantastic research that you do. So tell me about your career journey. How did this happen? Yeah, just tell me about your career journey.
Sure. First of all, I'm just a normal professor. I think I have a fantastic team, and that's why working with them, I benefit quite a bit. It really is. Science is a collaborative thing. We don't have the lone wolf, single person genius concept that has been in the past as a symbol for science. But we know more and more now that I think public understands more and more that we don't do science like that. We do science in teams, in collaborations, and it's a community that works together. I have to go to a talk to listen to someone say something, and one word triggers maybe the next big scientific achievement. So even that, I would call that a collaboration because I've gained from you, I learned from you. My journey is, I'm Turkish by origin. I finished my undergraduate in Turkey in Bilkent University. And I got to know about quantum optics there in my fourth year. I worked with Alexander Shumovsky, fantastic scientist back in the days. Of course, he passed away now. But he introduced me to the concept of quantum optics. I liked it. So for PhD, it's a bit random, but for PhD, I said, yeah, I'd like to continue in this area. And I joined Boston University to work on quantum communications, quantum imaging, but using entangled photons. So this is spontaneous permitting non-conversion. It's a nonlinear optics mechanism that in the ultimate limit of very low light levels, it actually generates quantum light, and pairs of photons are actually entangled. Very similar to what you have already covered with entangled photons generated by a quantum dot. There are other mechanisms where you can generate entangled photons. So I use that, the quantum limit of nonlinear optics. I did my PhD there, and then I moved to ETH Zurich to work with Atature Imamoglu. And there we started focusing on materials, semiconductors, quantum dots. That's my first exposure to quantum dots, was with Atature in ETH. And my focus started to be less on the photons and more on the spin to understand if there's any opportunities there. And that's how it progressed. That was very fruitful time for research for me. And then in 2007, I moved to Cambridge and I established my group together. And then we started working with semiconductor quantum dots again, but then added diamond as an interesting avenue to explore if there are opportunities there. And then, so the platforms exploded as the group grew as well.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. That is quite interesting. So you are the definition of a traveling scientist, like starting from Turkey to Boston to Switzerland and now in England at Cambridge. So that's quite interesting. Wow. Also interesting that you picked up different aspects of science along the way. And now that you have your own group, since you have your own group, you have tried to bring all of that together and add even more aspects like the diamond or so. And it's really interesting.
It's also important to highlight, that it's not just the scientific knowledge that is cultivating around as you travel. It's also approaches. US style is different than Swiss style, than German style, than UK style. It's amazing how science still has local tones. So by simply traveling and spending time experiencing different localities, you actually develop a different sense of how to do science as well. And you get to select the parts you really resonate with. And I think that's why I'm a big champion of mobility, that I want scientists to move around. I want them to go to different places, experience different ways of doing science, how science is interpreted, how science is perceived in different locations. It's amazing how such a universal topic is still actually has this very local tone associated.
That's absolutely, like, the work culture is different and approach to science, as you say, is very different, and bring those ways of working into your personality as a scientist. And it's quite interesting. Mete, you talked a lot about the different research projects. You already hinted at several of those. Now, if I were to ask you to pick one research project that you're super proud of, the one that you find the most fun or quirky, could you pick one research project and explain it to us in simple words in the section we call In Other Words? Don't hate me.
Sure. No, I love this. It's difficult to pick one. There are a few, I should say, in a scientist's career. It's not that every day we come up with a brand new idea and then you have innovation after innovation. That's not how science works. You're lucky if you have 3 or 4 big impacts, then that's amazing. Looking back, I would have difficulty picking just one, but I'll briefly highlight that on the photon side, there are 3 aspects that in the time of the birth of quantum optics and quantum statistical properties of light down to the photons, there are 3 aspects that was brought up theoretically. And 2 of those were experimentally verified pretty much right away in 2 or 3 years' time. In the 70s, it was all sorted, 60s, 70s. One aspect wasn't. It was very difficult to the point where even in textbooks, there are some quantum optics textbooks that say, and this is the 3rd property, the squeezing of the single photon, quadrature squeezing of the single photon, but it's too hard to see and practically it's not possible to observe. It's even written in textbooks that it's difficult to observe. I'm very proud that we managed to use the advantages of a semiconductor quantum dot rather than neutral atoms that people were considering back in the days, the brightness of the quantum dust, the strong oscillator strength it has, and the different measurement techniques that were developed over the years. We combined it all together and we demonstrated that a single photon actually possesses 2 unique properties, that it is number squeezed in the sense that it's 1 photon at a time, so it doesn't have variance, but at the same time, its electric field is squeezed. That means the noise on its electric field is quieter than even vacuum. So if you have no photons, there's some background quantum noise, the vacuum fluctuations. But if you have a single photon in the right superposition state, a quantum state again, which is not classically possible, the noise drops below the level of nothingness.
Your research is so cool. It's very clear to me that you really enjoy the research aspect of being a scientist. But there are also other aspects of being a scientist. So what else do you like about being a scientist? What else keeps you in research, in science, than just the research?
Communicating with like-minded people to identify what are interesting questions to ask and how to go about answering them, in the hope not only to find a solution, but in the hope of finding the next question. I think that chase of the unknown, that chase at the boundary of known and unknown, leveraging what we know to ask and explore what is not known yet, I think that's very exciting. So there's public generally thinks of scientists as the body of knowledge. But actually, in reality, it's not that we know everything. It's more that we are spending a lot of time with the unknown, a lot of time with things we don't know about, and we try to develop it. And I think what appears as frustration because we haven't found a solution is actually the journey itself. So it's quite fun. And doing this together with PhD students, postdocs, colleagues, collaborators, interacting with technical people that support us in facilities, infrastructure, all of that combined is what makes it fun. So it's that communication aspect that is actually critical, rather than just the abstract seeking the answer to a problem. It's the communication part that makes it really exciting and human and down to earth. So naturally, the teaching aspect comes in as well, because you're interacting with students, people who haven't thought of that one problem the way you have, perhaps, and you're trying to propose a way to understand, a way to reimagine how something, a fact or a collection of facts can be interpreted so it turns from information to knowledge. That's the teaching aspect of it that I really enjoy. And then there's the administrative part. grant management, finances, and all that, which is less exciting, but has to be done.
Yeah, those are the things that have to be done. It's like you have to take the bitter pill in order to continue to be able to do all the amazing things that you want to do. Yeah, that's quite interesting. And also the way you phrased it, it's also quite like chasing the unknown. That is definitely, and you're absolutely right. What might come off as frustration is more chase of the unknown or the journey towards
That's
finding
right.
the solution together. And it's not like one person is sitting in the dark lab and doing it themselves. It's more like
Exactly.
a group effort or a team effort to chase the unknown. That also makes it fun, right? Because then it's, this is like a project, fun little project that we're doing, a little project. But
We
that
we
is,
were
yeah,
we grow up playing games together, right? It's rare that you
exactly.
have fond memories of you yourself sitting alone in your room playing with games. It's more that you share it with other people, and that's that spirit of it, that very naive spirit of it, exists in research as well. And you shouldn't miss out on the fact that it actually stems from that curiosity and sharing of doing things together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds to me, Mete, that your research experience has been wonderful so far, and I'm sure it will continue to be wonderful in the future. However, if you had three wishes to improve your research experience, what would you ask for? I'm not promising anything here, and you already hinted at some of the things, but if you had three wishes, like you can go as crazy with the three wishes as you want. So, three wishes to improve your research experience. Please share them.
I would say I would like my first wish is, can I please have the same quality of amazing people, students, postdocs I've been working with? Can I just keep that going? I had a thrilling time. I had a wonderful time working with amazing minds and very good personalities as well. It's a really fantastic team. I really hope that wish number one, I'm happy to dedicate it to ensuring that this goes on with the same caliber, same quality, and same enthusiastic team, because that makes or breaks it. It boils down to that. The second is, I wish I can be better at time management, so I can actually have more time where it's unallocated, right? It's one thing that we're missing in today's world, especially in academia, is this idle time concept. We need to create these unallocated times where we're not doing anything. We're now operating in a regime where there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of going around, there's a lot of working, and we're a bit overworked. There's a lot of things we need to do. And in the end, you miss out on that occasional, let's say, serendipity style, an idea that will pop in your head. Of course, serendipity doesn't mean it just comes out of the blue. It means you have been actually thinking about it in the background without realizing. We need to create those environments so that bolder, more interesting, more imaginative questions can arise because of your subconscious, because you're thinking in the back without guiding it necessarily for a particular goal. That allows you to go from slightly longer time scale projects and ambitions. So I think I would like to have, my second wish is, let me be better at time management so I can actually allocate time for free, that it is not allocated for anything. You might go for a walk, you might sit in your office, you might read a book, but it's unallocated time for you to ponder, and that hopefully, without guarantee, but hopefully generates the new research directions. And the third wish I have is, it's actually quite feet on the ground wish as well. I want to make sure that we have some steady funding, so we don't have to write the next grant immediately with a worry about supporting the team. That's what I do. I like grants. We should be writing grants because it forces academics to think, what is it you want to do? And actually convince their colleagues that this is interesting. And also, at the same time, aim for that moonshot experiment, but know how to get there. That balance. That's why I think grant writing is good. But I'd like to have a bit of flexibility on this so that I'm writing grants to be able to support research activities. I'm not thinking too much short term on keeping the team going, and because I want to make sure that the team is feeling relaxed about their employment and their journey through the research as well, not having to worry about deadlines or end of tenure coming soon. So some sort of a baseline funding to ensure that you can keep the team going. And then on top, you can be creative to add new research grants.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all three of your wishes are realistic. And I think that you have the power to realize them, make them a reality more than I have the power to do that. But I would take the credit and say that, yeah, I grant all three of your wishes. continuing to ensure this amazing team, brilliant team forever and ever, like the same level of enthusiasm, probably not the same set of people, but different set of people, but similar environment. And also with carving out this idle time to think. I think that is very important. And I'm sure you will do it. And with the funding, come on, Meter, you will definitely make that happen. I'm sure you're making that happen. It's already happening rather around you to some extent. But of course, yeah, funding stability is something that is a big topic in research to take your mind off of things. Because then the wish number 3 also feeds into the wish number 2, right? Because if you have the stable funding, then you have a bit more time to think about nothing or let the thoughts from the back come in the front. Okay, so I have to say I lost Mete while he answered the last question. I heard his answer. I also have his answer, but somehow the video was lost. And this is probably due to the recording software that I'm using at the moment. But in any case, so the last question was, what can the followers of the Blue Sky account of Under the Microscope expect when Mete is taking over the account? And I'm going to read out his answer. And the answer to that question, what all of you can expect in the week that Mete will be taking over the account, is basically that it's going to be a fun surprise for everyone. But rest assured, we have coverage of the actual quantum light source operating, some fun experiments with it, as well as how life in the lab generally looks like. And there will also be sketches and fun posts for sure. So that is basically what Mete has in store for all of you. All of us, rather, when he will be, and he and his team will be taking over the Under the Microscope account on Blue Sky. So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you will enjoy it. And thank you very much for listening and staying till the very end. I truly appreciate your support. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you are not following the podcast Under the Microscope already, please do by going to your wherever you're listening right now, or wherever you're watching. If you're watching on YouTube, the video episode is available on the YouTube channel of the Science Talk. Please go ahead and subscribe to it. If you're listening to Under the Microscope on Apple Podcasts, feel free to leave a review. That would be wonderful. If you're listening on Spotify, do share in the comments. How did you like this episode? What were your key takeaways from this episode? And please do follow Under the Microscope everywhere. This is absolutely for free for you, and it means the world to me, and it enables me in bringing more and more amazing guests to you. We have big plans for season 7. Right now we are in season 6, of course. And thank you, and see you in the next one.
Before we wrap up today's episode, one last reminder about Twitter Insights Pro. If you're serious about securing your Twitter legacy, aligning your brand, or making the most of your content, Twitter Insights Pro has got you covered. It's simple. Download your archive, send it to us, and we'll take care of the rest. Make sure to check the link in the description to get started and take control of your digital legacy today.